Why is the climate changing faster than ever? Chapter 1. The Speed of the Storm. If you were to place your palm on the pulse of the planet, 2 fingers on the wrist of the winds, an ear pressed to the chest of the seas, you would feel it immediately. A quickening. Storm tracks curling tighter, summers stretching longer, fires running faster, rain falling harder, glaciers relinquishing their ancient grip. The climate is not merely changing, it is accelerating, the way a river quickens as it funnels through a narrowing gorge. The question that keeps us awake, that shapes headlines and kitchen table conversations and emergency plans, is simple and unnerving. Why is the climate changing faster than ever? To answer honestly, we have to step into a story that spans centuries but moves like a heartbeat. We begin with the physics spare, implacable, beautiful. Our planet sits at a comfortable distance from its star, bathed in sunlight that arrives as a cascade of visible rays. The Earth, warmed by this light, re-radiates energy back toward space as infrared heat. Some of that heat escapes, but some is intercepted by molecules in our atmosphere, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and others. These molecules are few compared to oxygen and nitrogen, but they matter immensely because they vibrate in ways that trap and scatter infrared energy. This is the greenhouse effect, and without it, our world would be a frozen stone. The trouble is not that the greenhouse exists, it's that we have thickened its panes with astonishing speed. Each year, we extract carbon that was buried in coal seams and oil reservoirs and gas fields for millions of years, then release it in seconds through combustion. Imagine emptying a vault that took eons to fill and spending the proceeds in a few generations. That is the core of the acceleration, a mismatched timescale, a geological inheritance converted into atmospheric change. The numbers are not shy. Carbon dioxide concentrations hovered around 280 parts per million before the Industrial Revolution. Now they've surged far beyond 420. Methane, more potent at trapping heat over short spans, has more than doubled. Nitrous oxide has climbed too, thanks to fertilizer use and industrial processes. Together, these gases add watts of extra energy per square meter to the planet's surface, as if we had installed a thin, invisible blanket around the world and then kept adding layers. But the rate, the speed that chills us, is not coming from one cause alone. It is the orchestra, not a single instrument. Fossil fuels dominate, yes, but the tempo of change is pushed along by land use shifts, by the removal of forests that once drew carbon from the air and stored it in trunks and soil. We clear land for cattle and crops, and the soil exhales carbon as it is tilled and warmed and dried. We drain peatlands' quiet, unassuming bogs that quietly held immense carbon, and they become sources instead of sinks. We build cities with dark roofs and sealed surfaces, which alters how heat is absorbed and released locally. We add industrial aerosols to the sky, tiny particles that can reflect sunlight and cool the air regionally, while also harming lungs and health. Some aerosols cool, black carbon soot warms. Some settle out quickly, others linger. They complicate the ledger, masking a fraction of the warming from greenhouse gases. When clean air policies reduce certain aerosols, a triumph for public health, a portion of the masked warming can step into view. And to the untrained eye, that can look like the climate suddenly speeding up because a veil has been lifted, not because the underlying heat stopped accumulating. There are also the feedbacks, those quiet amplifiers, threaded through the system. Ice reflects sunlight. Water absorbs it. As the Arctic warms and sea ice recedes, more solar energy sinks into dark ocean, which accelerates warming in a loop. Permafrost. once reliably frozen, thaws and liberates carbon dioxide and methane that bacteria had kept in cold storage. Forests, stressed by heat and drought, become more vulnerable to pests and fire. When they burn, they release the carbon they stored, and the landscape reflects less and holds less water, priming the cycle for more fire. The atmosphere, warmer by degrees, can hold more moisture, about 7% more water vapor for each Celsius of warming, so when storms form, they can wring out heavier rains. The extra moisture also carries latent heat that fuels more energetic weather systems, which in turn rearrange patterns of drought and downpour. None of these feedbacks are villains in a melodrama. They're gears in a machine. But gears can slip, catch, accelerate. We mistake novelty for speed. In truth, the trend lines have been slanting upward for decades. What's new is that they now intercept our daily lives with an intimacy we can't ignore. A farmer watches planting windows narrow and flood maps redraw themselves. A family evacuates twice in 5 years because the 100-year storm refuses to honor its name. A child grows up believing that summers are supposed to smell faintly of smoke. Our perception has caught up to the physics. But perception also misleads. The climate did not begin to change when our timelines did. It is simply that cumulative changes have crossed thresholds that our senses and our infrastructure recognize. A late frost that wipes out an orchard is not proof of global cooling. It can be the chaotic flourish of a warming world that disrupts familiar patterns. Variability persists. The baseline shifts. So, why faster now? Consider momentum. The oceans, covering 70% of Earth, act as an enormous heat sink. They have absorbed the majority of the excess energy trapped by greenhouse gases, buffering surface warming and buying us time. But even buffers saturate. As heat penetrates deeper, ocean circulation patterns respond. Warm, fresh layers can stratify the upper ocean, inhibiting mixing and trapping heat near the surface. Marine heat waves, once rare, become more frequent, bleaching corals, shifting fisheries, triggering algae blooms that rewrite coastal economies. A warmer ocean evaporates faster, humidifying the atmosphere. Meanwhile, the cryosphere ice sheets, glaciers, seasonal snowpack stores a ledger of imbalance. Once ice loss accelerates beyond certain slopes, gravity and meltwater combine to speed the slide. Slow physics, fast consequences. There's another layer. The sociology of carbon. Our world has become a networked engine of energy. Billions of people have moved from poverty toward middle-class aspirations, a moral victory that has also increased total energy demand. Urbanization concentrates needs and opportunities. Manufacturing hubs feed global supply chains that deliver goods across oceans to our doors in days. The remarkable, necessary dream of development has been powered primarily by fossil carbon. Recent years have brought explosive growth in renewable energy, efficiency, and electrification. Yet for much of the early 21st century, absolute emissions kept rising because growth outran substitution. The result is not a simple line but a compound curve. As the planet warms, the forces that warm it have, until very recently, continued to expand. Acceleration begets acceleration. We should also talk about friction, because slowdowns in one place can paradoxically increase speed elsewhere. Consider aerosol reductions again, or the pandemic years when emissions briefly dipped but quickly rebounded. Consider how drought can diminish hydroelectric generation, pushing grids back toward fossil power at the very moment we aim to decarbonize. Consider how geopolitical disruptions can reshape energy markets, shifting coal or gas use in ways that temporarily spike emissions. These are not excuses, They are dynamics. The climate system responds to total inputs, not our intentions. Then there are the thresholds popularized as tipping points, at once overused and underappreciated. A tipping point is not a cinematic cliff where everything falls at once. More often, it's the moment when the internal brake seize up and the system glides into a new lane that is hard to exit. The Arctic, warming faster than the global average, may stabilize with far less summer ice changing jet stream behavior in ways that ripple over continents. Alpine glaciers, once sustained by winter snow, may pass a mass balance threshold beyond which recovery becomes implausible on human timescales. Rainforests, if pushed past a certain fraction of deforestation and drought, may transition toward savanna-like states in parts, losing their immense moisture recycling role. The collapse of a major ocean circulation pattern remains a low-probability, high-impact risk that scientists watch with worried rigor. None of these are foregone conclusions everywhere, but the prospect of thresholds concentrates the mind. It also sharpens the feeling of acceleration. When a system flips its mode, the change looks sudden, even if the forces built slowly. Is it measurement? People ask. Are we simply looking harder, sharing more? Certainly, the instruments have improved. Satellites now scan sea surface temperatures with crisp resolution. Ground stations knit together global data sets. Reanalyses blend models and observations to fill gaps that once obscured trends. But the instruments do not summon heat from nothing. They reveal it. Raw thermometers from the 19th century would not have missed the vanishing of glaciers visible from town squares. Tide gauges that tracked ports for a century would not have overlooked the sea quietly climbing their pilings. Farmers don't need satellites to notice that the rains come wrong. Our improved measurement does not invent the acceleration, it proves it. A skeptical friend might say, what about natural cycles? El Niño and La Niña slosh heat across the Pacific, rearranging weather worldwide. Volcanic eruptions inject aerosols into the stratosphere and can cool the planet for a stretch. The sun varies subtly on cycles measured in years and decades, all true. Yet cycles oscillate around a baseline. When the baseline rises, the peaks and valleys ride higher, like waves on a tide. Strong El Niño years often reveal the trend. Global temperatures notch new records, sea ice contracts, and wildfire seasons swell. La Niña years used to cool and quiet the record books. Now they often match or exceed our hottest years of the 20th century. The tide has come in. We reach for images to describe what data shows. Perhaps imagine the climate as a vast orchestra hall. For millennia, the performance has shifted a little louder, a little softer, but the score was familiar. In the last 2 centuries, a new section has been added. Brass instruments blaring, percussion rolling, all amplified through a modern sound system. The melody is still there, the rhythms of seasons, ocean cycles, volcanic interludes, but the amplifiers have changed the experience. Now we hear crescendos that rattle the seatbacks. There is one more reason this feels faster than ever. Because the stakes have matured with us. The infrastructure we rely on was built for a certain range of expectation, bridges sized for specific flood probabilities, power grids engineered for known peaks, building codes designed for historic winds and temps. As the climate shifts, the old assumptions misfire. What was once a rare outlier becomes a regular guest, and systems groan, ports flood, substations blink out, algorithms that set insurance premiums whir and throw exceptions. The climate accelerates, the failures compound. It's not that nature has become malevolent, it's that our agreements with the past grow stale before their expiry date. So the first truth is this: the climate is changing faster than ever, because we have added heat-trapping gases faster than ever, while removing nature's sponges and polishing the feedback loops that return our choices to us with interest. The second truth is gentler and harder. We are not spectators. The same hands that built the engines can build the brakes and the wings. This is not false hope. It is arithmetic. Every ton of carbon we do not release is a fraction of a watt per square meter that does not haunt the planet for centuries. Every forest protected and restored is a breath the atmosphere does not have to hold. Every grid we clean, every car we electrify, every factory we redesign, every stove we swap, every acre of soil we steward is a turn of the wheel in the opposite direction. The curvature of the emissions curve is the curvature of destiny. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. This chapter promises to explain the speed. The next must confront what to do with it. Before we turn that page, pause with the paradox. Acceleration creates a narrowness that focuses the mind, yet we require breadth of vision, of cooperation to respond. To steady our hands, we should grasp the levers more clearly. First, physics. The radiative balance of Earth is not a mystery. It's a ledger. Add long-lived greenhouse gases, retain more heat. The persistence of carbon dioxide hundreds to thousands of years means the atmosphere remembers our parties long after the lights turn off. Methane is short-lived but intense. Reducing it can shave near-term warming, which matters in a race where decades decide destinies. Second, biology. Ecosystems are not background scenery. They are co-authors. Forests, grasslands, wetlands, plankton blooms all draw carbon from air and water and weave it into life. Their health determines the pace of return. Disturb them, and the pace quickens. Tend them, and the chorus softens. Third, chemistry and particles. Aerosols complicate, but do not contradict. The warming story. Cleaning the air helps lungs today and uncloaks hidden warming we must address. The only safe path is to clean both, the air people breathe and the greenhouse gases the planet cannot. Fourth, the ocean's patience. We have banked heat in the seas. That bank charges interest marine heat waves, altered currents, rising seas. When we imagine time, we must imagine water remembering us. Fifth, society's reflex. Policies and markets can move slower than physics until they suddenly move faster. We have seen it in the leap of solar and wind, in batteries, in heat pumps, in new cement chemistries and green hydrogen pilots, in farmers who nurture soil carbon, in cities that cool themselves with trees and reflective roofs. We have also seen setbacks and detours. The climate's acceleration does not honor our bureaucracy. It demands we retool it. If this chapter has done its job, one sensation now threads through your thoughts. The sensation of a clock not simply ticking, but spinning, and of a world that can still catch it. There's a humility in recognizing that we nudged a planet and it responded like a giant. There's also a pride in remembering that we are the kind of species that can map stars and splice genes and coordinate across continents to eradicate diseases. We can rewire systems when we must. The storm is not only meteorological, it is moral, logistical, imaginative. Speed is the adversary and the teacher. It tells us what matters by revealing what breaks. It shows us where to fortify, whom to protect, how to measure success not only in tons and degrees but in lives quieter, harvests steadier, shorelines less anxious. The past taught us how to burn. The present is teaching us how to turn. The future will ask whether we learned fast enough. Turn the page. In the next chapter, We will talk about levers, technologies and policies, culture and economics, habits of heart and hand that slow the quickening river without damming the human spirit. We will chart how to bend the curve, not as an abstraction but as a practice, neighborhood by neighborhood, factory by factory, field by field. We will keep faith with physics, and we will make friends with momentum, and we will remember always that acceleration cuts both ways. Chapter 2. How to slow a river. When a river runs too fast, the instinct is to build a dam. But dams alone are crude instruments, effective in a crisis, brittle over time. Rivers are tamed with floodplains, switchbacks, wetlands, willow roots knitting banks together, beavers at work, and careful stewardship upstream. If Chapter 1 was about the physics that made the climate river quicken, this chapter is about the human craft that can slow and redirect it without drying out the future. We will talk about levers and lessons, about the arithmetic of emissions and the poetics of courage, about what it means practically, daily, to match the speed of our response to the speed of the problem. Start with a rule so simple it feels like a proverb. Every ton matters. We sometimes talk about climate action as if only grand gestures count, but the atmosphere is neither sentimental nor snobbish. It tallies molecules. A ton of carbon dioxide avoided by a household boiler is as real as a ton avoided by a steel mill. The steel mill matters more because of scale, not because of purity. The acid test for a solution is not whether it makes us feel virtuous, it is whether the math works, whether it reduces, removes, or replaces emissions at a speed and scale commensurate with the crisis, without creating harms that outlast the cure. This is why electrify everything is not a slogan, but a strategy. We know how to make electricity without combustion. Sunlight on silicon, wind over turbines, water through turbines, heat from the earth, and, for some countries, fission of atoms. When we electrify cars and buses, stoves and furnaces and heat, we move combustion from billions of tailpipes and chimneys into a smaller number of power plants that can be cleaned up. We turn diffuse, hard-to-regulate emissions into concentrated, decarbonizable waves. The grid becomes a canvas where a million small actions add up to something visible from space. But the grid we inherited was designed for a different century. It expected one-way flow, power plants at the edge or center, electrons marching down transmission lines to passive customers. The new grid is a conversation: rooftop solar, neighborhood batteries, vehicle-to-grid charging, smart thermostats that dance with supply, industrial loads that shift minutes or hours to flatten peaks. These turn a monologue into an orchestra. The faster we can build transmission lines across landscapes, buried where needed, elevated where possible, designed with communities and wildlife in mind, the faster we can connect windy plains to bustling cities, sunny deserts to manufacturing hubs, offshore winds to inland trains. Permitting must be accelerated without trampling consent. This is not an impossible balance. It is a design challenge. Then there is heat, the quiet giant. Heating and cooling buildings is responsible for a vast slice of energy use. The hero here is not a futuristic contraption. It is the humble heat pump, a refrigerator running backwards to move heat rather than make it by burning. In a row house in Philadelphia, and a school in Nairobi, and a farmhouse in Japan, heat pumps are already cutting bills and emissions. Paired with weatherization, insulation, air sealing, smarter windows, and with district heating where it makes sense, we can make buildings into shelters not just from weather but from energy volatility. When done well, this is not hair shirt environmentalism. It is comfort with less waste. Industry, too, has a map. Cement and steel, the bedrock of modernity, are hard because their emissions are both energy and chemistry, but they are not immutable. Clinker in cement can be reduced with new recipes, supplementary cementitious materials, alternative binders that cure with less carbon, carbon-cured concrete that locks CO2 into the stone itself. Steel can be made with green hydrogen reducing iron ore instead of coal, powered by renewables and recycled in electric arc furnaces. Early plants in Northern Europe, Australia, and the United States are proving that engineering stubbornness can be turned toward decarbonization with the same ingenuity that built blast furnaces in the first place. The curve will bend faster as policies create demand for low-carbon materials, public procurement that buys clean steel for bridges and clean cement for schools. Transport is both choreography and choice. Cities that prioritize humans over cars reduce emissions by design. Bus rapid transit with real right-of-way, bike lanes that are safe for an 8-year-old to ride, sidewalks shaded by trees, trains that come often enough that you don't need a timetable. These are climate policies disguised as joy. For the journeys that still require cars, electric vehicles are the bridge, their costs falling, their ranges growing, their batteries soon repurposed for second lives in storage. For trucks that haul heavy loads across long distances, batteries may share the task with hydrogen fuel cells, where appropriate. And then, the skies and seas. Sustainable aviation fuels made from waste oils and green hydrogen-derived e-fuels, ships powered by ammonia or methanol, sails returning in high-tech forms to capture wind anew. No single fuel will dominate every lane. Diversity is resilience. Agriculture and land are our partners and professors. Soil is not dirt, it is a living city. The way we till and plant and graze and fertilize can either release carbon like a sigh or draw it down like a promise. Cover crops keep soil armored and fed. Agroforestry laces trees into fields, adding shade, fruit, and carbon storage. Managed grazing lets grasslands breathe and deepen their roots. Precision application of nutrients reduces nitrous oxide, that quiet hot gas. Peatlands can be re-wetted to lock away millennia of carbon. Mangroves and salt marshes can be restored as storm buffers that also sequester blue carbon. None of this is easy everywhere. Some of it is simple somewhere. When land stewardship is paired with land rights, respect for indigenous sovereignty, support for smallholders, carbon becomes a byproduct of justice. We also have to talk about methane with the urgency it deserves. Methane's heat-trapping power over the short term makes it the lever you grab when the room is on fire. Plugging leaks from oil and gas infrastructure is the fastest, cheapest cut we can make. Satellites can now spot super emitters. Regulators can require fixes within days, not years. In landfills, capturing methane to make energy turns rot into resource. In rice paddies, alternate wetting and drying can curb methane without hurting yields. In cattle, feed additives and better manure management can lower emissions. Each of these measures buys time, reducing near-term warming while the longer game of carbon dioxide plays out. Some advocate carbon removal as a panacea. It is not. But it is a necessary part of a complete plan. Even if we slam the brakes on emissions, we will need to pull some carbon back from the sky to balance sectors that are hard to eliminate entirely and to draw down overshoot. The wisest approach is a portfolio. Trees and soil, where permanence and biodiversity are respected. Mineralization that locks CO2 into stone for geologic timescales. Direct air capture, powered by clean energy in places where geology welcomes storage. Quality matters. Accounting must be strict. We cannot allow a ton removed to be a paper fiction. But we also cannot allow purism to forbid anything that is not perfect. Perfection is the sibling of procrastination. Integrity is the cousin of speed. What about adaptation? We used to whisper the word, as if saying it would concede defeat. We know better now. Adaptation is not surrender. It is stewardship. It is floodplains reclaimed as parks that absorb storm surges and offer soccer fields on sunny days. It is homes elevated, substations armored, microgrids that island when the main grid falters, early warning systems that reach every phone with timely, intelligible alerts. It is heat action plans, cooling centers, tree canopies, reflective roofs, work rules that protect laborers from heat stroke. It is crop insurance, designed for a world where rains come late, and parametric insurance that pays out based on weather triggers rather than opaque claims. It is moving some communities with dignity and foresight rather than after a catastrophe. Managed retreat is the hardest sentence in the lexicon of resilience, but the alternative is unmanaged loss. Policy is the loom on which all these threads are woven. Carbon pricing can nudge markets, but alone it is a violin playing without an orchestra. Standards and mandates, clean electricity standards, zero-emission vehicle rules, building codes that ban new fossil hookups give clarity that investors crave, public investment de-risks the first-of-a-kind projects that unlock private capital for the 10th of a kind. Trade policies can reward cleaner goods. Border adjustments can prevent polluters from free-riding. And justice must be center frame. Transition assistance for communities built around mines and refineries, workforce development for new industries, protections against energy poverty, and the simple, radical act of listening to frontline communities before we design their futures. Culture moves markets as surely as markets move culture. A chef who normalizes induction stoves on a cooking show may cut more gas lines than 1,000 tweets. A school district that electrifies its buses cleans lungs and minds at the same time because children learn what they ride. A faith leader who preaches about stewardship can tilt a congregation toward solar. A football club that plants shade trees along the walk to the stadium can turn fans into foresters. We underestimate the power of contagion of a technology or behavior spreading because it is visibly better and socially admired. We cannot skip the story of money. Fossil fuels are entangled with finance like roots around a pipe. Pension funds, insurance pools, sovereign wealth funds, these steer rivers of capital. When they divest from high-risk, high-carbon assets and invest in clean infrastructure, they do not just send a message, they change the arithmetic of what gets built. Central banks and regulators, by recognizing climate risk as financial risk, can supervise a more orderly transition. At the household scale, low-interest loans and on-bill financing can make heat pumps and weatherization affordable. Green premiums, the extra cost of a clean option, shrink fastest when we buy enough to push it down the learning curve. The faster we buy, the sooner we stop paying extra. Technology, too, has a temperament. It likes to learn. Solar modules have fallen in cost not by miracle but by iteration, factories learning how to make them better, supply chains learning how to move them faster, developers learning how to stitch them into landscapes with fewer surprises. Batteries are on a similar glide path. Electrolyzers that split water into hydrogen are just stepping onto it. Some technologies, long-duration storage, advanced nuclear, carbon-neutral shipping fuels, need the runway that only public-private partnership can provide. To give them that runway is not to pick winners, but to build a league where more teams can win. If you want a picture of how acceleration can also work for us, walk through a city that has decided to take itself seriously. Picture this: dawn in a coastal metropolis, once nicknamed for its smog. The port cranes hum, but their power comes from shorelines, not the ship's diesel. The morning freight is carried by electric trucks, scheduled to avoid rush hour, their routes optimized so they can refill at chargers behind warehouses, stenciled with murals of birds that are back after decades away. Apartment rooftops wear solar-like crowns. Some host gardens where grandparents teach children the names of herbs. The old coal plant is now a battery park, a field of quiet cabinets that inhale electrons at noon and exhale at supper. The local college's materials lab has a partnership with the cement plant upriver to cure concrete with captured 2,2. The city's procurement department specifies that this is the concrete they will buy for schools and sidewalks. Street trees are mapped like VIPs. Each one has a watering schedule and a sensor that signals if it's thirsty. An app lets residents adopt a tree and gets them tickets to the team's home game if their tree thrives through summer. Buses glide by on dedicated lanes. When they break, they recover energy and whisper it back into the grid. In the late afternoon, a text goes out to anyone who opted in. Peak demand is approaching. If you can delay your dishwasher by an hour, the city will credit your bill. Enough people say yes that the peaker plant on the edge of town, once a smoky relic that only ran a few dozen hours a year, has been retired. Its site slated for a new vocational school specializing in heat pump installation and grid maintenance. At sunset, the seawall along the old industrial waterfront is not a wall at all, but a necklace of parks and elevated paths that crumple the geometry of the coastline into coves and marshy fingers. On storm days, those coves swallow the surge and hand it back to the harbor at a pace the drains can manage. On normal days, couples watch herons and eat ice cream. This is not utopia. It is a city that chose. What about the parts of the world still climbing the first rungs of prosperity? They have the right to energy, to cool homes, to motorbikes that start and clinics with reliable lights. The trick, and it is not a small one, is to build their grids and industries clean from the outset. Distributed solar in villages, mini grids that grow as demand grows, clean cooking that frees women from smoke, e-motorbikes that are quiet and cheap to run, buses that smell like nothing, factories sited near renewables. Mineral wealth used to make batteries rather than chains. The global North owes the global South more than advice. Capital at terms that respect dignity, technology transfer without strings that bind, debt relief that recognizes that a planet on fire cannot pay interest. Climate solidarity is not charity. It is self-preservation with grace. We also need humility about uncertainty. Some parts of the climate system may surprise us for good cloud feedbacks that soften, ocean currents that prove more stubborn than feared. Others may surprise us for ill. The wise course is robust. Invest in no-regrets actions that pay off under a range of futures. Preserve optionality so we can pivot as we learn. This is the opposite of panic. Panic is brittle. Preparedness is supple. And where does an individual enter this flood of plans? Right where you stand. The most powerful action is often the one that makes 3 others easier. If you are a teacher, turn your classroom into a laboratory of possibility. Students mapping thermal leaks in the school with borrowed infrared cameras, writing to the school board about buses that make their lungs lighter. If you are a builder, learn the craft of heat pumps and low-carbon concrete and earn the premium that early expertise commands. If you run a restaurant, swap gas for induction and tell your story. Your cooks will thank you on August afternoons. If you are a mayor, hire one more planner than you think you need and measure what matters. If you are a parent, join the chorus asking your utility to build more lines and your city to plant more trees. If you are a farmer, Tap into extension services that respect your knowledge and add to it. If you are young, organize. If you are old, mentor. If you are tired, rest, then rejoin. Courage is a relay. Let us return, finally, to the river. It runs fast because we steepen the channel and strip the banks. Slowing it will not be one act but many stones placed at the right angles, plants with roots that hold and sip, channels that distribute floods across meadows rather than into living rooms. We will still have storms. We will, for a while, have worse storms than our grandparents knew. But storms need not be synonymous with tragedy. A world that has chosen to learn can carry water without drowning. We began with a question. Why is the climate changing faster than ever? We end with a companion. How do we match that speed with wisdom? If this book has done anything, let it be to shift acceleration from an enemy to a lesson. The lesson is not that we must move blindly, it is that we must move together, eyes open, tools ready, stories aligned with physics and possibility. And when the day feels heavy, touch the future with your hands. Plant a tree whose shade will fall on a stranger. Help a neighbor install a heat pump. Vote in a boring local race that decides where the next substation goes. Write a procurement rule that buys cleaner steel. Teach a child why ice glows blue and why that matters. Stand on a restored shoreline and watch the tide move in and out as it has for ages, knowing that this time we are moving with it. The river is quick. We are quicker when we choose to be. The storm is loud. We can be louder, not with noise but with work. There is no single hero in this story. There is a cast of billions. That is its terror and its grace. If acceleration got us here, let acceleration of empathy, of invention, of repair take us home.